Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the Board of Trustees, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. I have a couple announcements, and then Michelle will have one. First, I'd like to say, I don't know if ministry chairs are checking their emails, but Membership Caring Ministry is hosting a ministry fair on September 10th, right after the Sunday service. So if all the chairs can make sure they're present there or have someone to fill in for them, I'd really appreciate it. Also, I would like you to send me a copy of all the active members in your ministry. And the second announcement I have is our fall rummage sale will be the last Friday and Saturday of September. For those of you who have read the upcoming, the dates say September 30th and October 1st, which is actually 29th and 30th. And that's my mistake. I know you thought I was perfect, but so please start clearing out all your items that you would like to donate, and you can bring them in on any Sunday in September, plus during the week of September 25th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we could always use help on those days. We had a lot of fun last spring for our spring sale, and I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of people this time too, and we could have a lot of fun again. So Michelle?
Hello. Earth Charter Indiana is hosting a double featured short documentary screening featuring the movies Shifting Sands and Liminal, which feature environmental challenges for the region at IU and Gary on Thursday, September 7th. So if anybody would like more info or would like to carpool, please let me know. Tracy and I are hosting a bocce ball tournament dinner church fundraiser that's been rescheduled a couple times. Now it is Saturday, September 9th at 4 o'clock at our house in Crown Point. Dinner will be provided for a $25 donation. If you would like to play bocce ball, it is also $25 per person. The winning team will split the bocce ball money with the church. Drinks are included. If you can roll a ball, you can play bocce ball, so come out and have fun night and help out the church at the same time. Mary Ann and I are working on a Harry Potter escape room fundraiser for October 7th, so if you would like to help us out with this, then let me or Mary Ann know. Thank you.
We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming at that time. The service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Wearing masks is optional. Oh, sorry, that should have been taken out of here. Please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you're attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Now please silence your devices and take a deep breath. And another. And join us in the spirit of reverence.
If you would, take a second, help me light the chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of a life that we share together.
At the opening words, we gather in the Sabbath moon to worship in spirit and truth, to raise a joyful noise to the eternal mystery, to reconfirm our commitment to the common good, to come from many paths to explore which is hidden, to consider the ways of our hearts, to confess how we have stumbled, to heal what is broken. We assemble in the effort to quicken our compassion and mercy, to deepen our understanding, to renew our courage, to remember who we are. Then do we celebrate the grace and gift of life and practice our faith to the greater glory of the Spirit.
Please rise and body your spirit for opening hymn number 346. In your gray hymnal, come sing a song with me. And remain standing for the affirmation of faith and doxology.
Standing for our affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is the sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We are striving to create a worship service which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who's joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making the live streaming and recording possible. For those present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbor by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile fill the spaces between us.
Please be seated. We have a moment in this moment, as we do every moment, to check in with ourselves, to notice what joys or sorrows might be living within, and what desires might be there to share those joys and sorrows with others. We come into this shared space from our own individual experiences, and how we choose to weave our lives with one another is the place where our agency and where possible beautiful creativity comes. So I will walk around with a microphone in just a moment to invite folks to share their joys and sorrows, anything that's been lifting you up or weighing you down. And when I come up to you with a microphone, if you'd like to share something, just please share your name with us so that we know who you are. Does anybody have a joy or a sorrow this morning?
morning. Our story for the child in each of us is called Sustaining the Tree of Life, very appropriately, and it's by Lynn Gardner. The tree stood in the middle of the village. Its trunk was so large that it took 6 people holding hands to reach around it. The roots were strong and wide, and its branches spread out over the village square, offering shelter from the rain or shade from the summer sun. Its fruit was juicy, sweet, and plentiful. The people of the village loved the tree. Children played beneath it and climbed its lowest branches. Young people knew that if you whispered your dreams into the tree, they were more likely to come true. People who proclaimed their love for or friendship for one another beneath its branches found their relationships to be nourishing, and elders discovered that their sweetest memories could be counted on when they were near the great tree. The tree had been witness to so much, and when the breezes blew through the leaves, one could hear the echoes of generations, laughter, conversations, dreams, prayers, and songs. Animals loved the tree too. Rabbits lived in burrows under the roots. Squirrels and monkeys lived in the branches, and bats and birds flew in to eat the abundant fruit. The tree seemed to buzz with life. One day, a traveling merchant arrived in the village. He rested in the shade and ate 2 pieces of the delicious fruit. "This fruit is incredible," he said. "I would like to have some to sell in the next villages that I visit. Who owns this tree?" "Why, no one owns this tree," replied a villager. "If anything, we belong to it." "Well then, if no one owns the tree, then no one will mind if I pick the fruit," said the merchant, and began to fill a basket. "Why, I mind," said the villager, "and today I am the keeper of the tree." "What do you mean, the keeper of the tree?" "Why, we each take turns being here with the tree. We could never own it. We are here as protectors and sustainers." "Why, that's ridiculous. This tree doesn't need you. You could just take what you need, take what you want. The tree will continue." But the villager couldn't be persuaded. "Why, sir, this tree isn't like that. We don't come here to take from it, even though we receive much. We are keepers of the tree because this is where we are nourished. This is where some of our most precious memories are, and where our people have dreamed. This is where we remember who we want to become." "Well," said the merchant, "if you think this tree is very special, but it doesn't need you to sit with it, why, that's preposterous." "Ah," replied the villager, "the tree itself may not need me, but what of others who come by? Just this morning I sat with a woman whose heart was heavy with worry. Had I not been here, she would have had to carry that weight alone. And this afternoon, a tired couple came by and they rested with me. They said they had been looking for a place like this. And then an elder came by, and we watched the birds in the branches together. And now, here you are. You were confused about what this tree is and how to be with it. Imagine if you had arrived and not found anyone here to talk with. You might have continued thinking that everything you do is all about you. Well, luckily for you, my friend, I'm here to let you know that when you care for the tree of life, it becomes about so much more than just you." And the merchant sat for a while in the shade, thinking about these ideas that felt new and a little challenging. As the sun went down, he picked up his bag and headed out of town, whistling a song that he hadn't thought of in years. And on his way, he shared a smile with each person he met, his heart feeling strangely light and joyful. And the people of the village? They continued to sustain the tree of life, to care for one another, and to share their gifts with grace and gratitude. And may it be so for each of us. Now, if you will, please rise in body and spirit, and we'll sing our middle hymn, 396, I Know This Rose Will Open.
We'll sing this one 3 times together in unison. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
Please be seated. So we are in the second week of this series in which we're talking about covenant, because if there is one thing that is central to Unitarian Universalism, it is our approach to covenant. Arguably, it's a contested claim, but I will make it. Last week we talked about the gift of covenant, how Unitarian Universalism and before it Unitarianism and Universalism have been on the brink of being the religion of the future for a while now. But we've been caught up in the same sort of cultural tendency towards individualism. Our relationship to community is often that of the lone individual whose job it is to make things right. This week, we'll be talking about the practice of covenant versus just the talking about covenant. During the previous week, or the previous worship series rather, in July, we incorporated some practice into the worship service. And first, Gail Thomas and then I made some invitations during the service for folks to partner up with each other, and invited some experiences of intimacy, of eye contact, of presence, of holding hands, of non-verbally checking in for consent. And afterwards, different folks reflected their varied experiences. There was some fear, there was some anxiety, there was some trepidation. For many, there was a sense of initial discomfort that gradually gave way to a sense of spaciousness or feeling moved. Those were distinctly countercultural experiences that you were invited to take part in at that point. Counter to the cultural expectation of, well, you do you and I'll do me, or counter to the deceiving safety of each of us residing in our own walled-off garden of a solo life. In Christianity, there is this concept of being in the world, but not of the world. A recognition that to be a living human is to have to face the realities of day-to-day existence, and also, at the same time, an insistence that those realities of day-to-day existence are not everything. They are only a piece of the truth. And Christians are called to a way of life that is not limited by cultural norms. And to the extent that Christians get too caught up in the assumptions and prejudices and premises of their own culture, they have strayed from the path. They are no longer living a faithful life. And similarly, in Unitarian Universalism, we are also challenged to stay faithful to this path that we are on together and not be led astray by our own preconceptions or blind spots. And so when Gail first invited folks to pair up during that worship service in July, she explicitly acknowledged the possible discomfort that folks might feel. And there was this sort of laughter in the room when she said that. That happens when you name something that everybody's sort of thinking or feeling, and then we get to put it into words and all acknowledge that it's there. It's a laughter of relief that something has been acknowledged and welcomed into the space. Because this business of feeling seen, feeling understood, is tricky. It's something that I believe that we all desire very deeply, for someone to be with us, to acknowledge our being, to meet us there, to honor us by recognizing our dignity, and to feel that what we hold in our minds and hearts can also be held in the minds and hearts of others, and that we can see it reflected there. But in order to experience that, we need to risk feeling vulnerable, feeling exposed, maybe feeling dropped. And there's simply no way around it. Which doesn't mean that we should force ourselves into just like going all the way. I've met people who I'm just going to go as hard as possible and just be super vulnerable. And they have a hard time holding on to their own boundaries. So I'm not saying get rid of your own boundaries, but just the inevitability of that discomfort whenever we lean into that edge, and developing the capacity to moderate and to modulate that for ourselves. For us Unitarian Universalists, who have no creed, no doctrine, who don't have a shared story that we all turn to, the only common ground to which we can turn is that of covenant. You can talk a little bit about history, but our history is so spread out. There's the strain of the Universalists in the United States and the Unitarians in the United States and in Transylvania and England, and they kind of mesh together, but they kind of don't. And you can go back to the Arian controversy in the 3rd century and how that might play into it. We don't have a straight, simple line of story to tell. So covenant is the thing that we often have to come back to. It's the garden plot that is ours to tend together, in which you could have your row of Christianity or neo-paganism or Buddhism or Judaism or Islam or whatever guideposts you call on to orient yourself in your journey through life. And the person sitting next to you in this room has their row in this shared garden. And the person next to them has their row in that shared garden that we're able to tend together, to weed together, to water together, to share the supplies for, supporting one another in this tending project. Because like the tree of life in our story this morning, it needs protection, it needs sustenance, but unlike the tree of life in our story this morning, the garden cannot exist without us. It only comes into being through our intentionality together. It's taken years of work for me to get to the point that I feel able to ask for help. And it still feels totally counter to the way that I assume that the world works. The pinnacle experience that I recall for myself was when I moved to New York City and I got this place in a bedroom on the 3rd floor of this walk-up, and I moved entirely myself. And my biggest possession at that point was a futon that when I bought the futon, I wanted the biggest, most luxurious futon you could get. So it was a 10-inch thick futon, which I don't know if you ever tried to move a 10-inch thick mattress up a flight of stairs without an elevator. to support you in that process. But it's a little tricky. There's a lot of pushing and pulling and scrambling over the mattress in between to make that happen. And at some point, when I was about halfway up the second story, I started wondering, why did I choose to do this myself? Might there have been some other option that I could have explored? But still, it took a long time for me to figure out this whole asking for help thing. It's just not how I assumed that things worked. Oh, it made sense for how it worked for other people. Of course, other people should work together and ask for help and be in common cause with one another, but for me, it just didn't break through beyond conceptually. After the end of a relationship that I was in once, I moved out to the second floor of a little farmhouse in the country. And it had really lovely things about it. It was in sort of the attic space that had been converted into apartment, and so there were these slanted roofs. You had to avoid hitting your head, but it was very cute and quaint. And there was a apiary. The landlord who lived downstairs kept bees that were off in the yard, and so he would give me free jars of honey that's about as local as you can get, super local honey. And across the street, there was a path that just went off into the woods. And you could just walk for miles and miles and miles down that path. And at one point, it snowed. And it was a huge snowstorm in New England, and we got 3 feet of snow. And going to that path and walking around on the surface and sometimes falling into the surface of snow down that path was a tremendous experience. But the hard point in that was after being in this relationship for a few years, for 3 years, which at that point had been my longest relationship, being out in the country in this farmhouse, there was a distinct feeling of loneliness. And I reached the point that the only thing that my grieving self could think of doing was reaching out. And so I gave a friend a call, not a particularly close friend, but a friend who just seemed like the right person to call. Someone that I didn't talk to all that much, who lived across the country, and we just talked. And I felt so scared in those conversations because there wasn't some particular content. We weren't talking about some movie that we just seen or an experience that we just had together or plans that we were making. We were just talking about how things were going, which is part of the value of small group ministry, of covenant groups in congregations that have those sort of experiences. There's an opportunity, a space that's made to share on that deeper level. But the primary content of these conversations was the state of my heart and my spirit. And my friend not only met me in that, but also thanked me. Thanked me for the gift that I had given her of my own vulnerability. And that gift of vulnerability is connected to this metaphor of the tree of life from our story this morning. Something that we don't create, something that we can tend to, but is there. We can choose to ignore it, or we can choose to mind it and recognize how much it can enrich us all. There's somebody else that I dated at one point who would ask me when I would share something difficult that I was going through. She would just say, "Is there anything that I can help you with around that?" And even though I almost never could come up with an answer to that question, just the fact that she would ask had my heart relax, had my shoulders sink down a little bit. I'd feel a little bit more at home in the world, that my vulnerability was being tended to and met. How easy and obvious it can feel in our culture just to manage things ourselves. But there are moments when we are reminded that the absolute greatest gift that we can usually give to one another is our vulnerability, our request for support, a revealing of ourselves. Telling your partner that there's something that you've held back out of fear. Telling your friend that we'd like our friendship with them to be something different or evolve in a particular way or look like something in particular. When we give our vulnerability, there's of course no guarantee that it's going to be met with grace or generosity. If there was a guarantee that it was going to be met with generosity or grace, then it wouldn't be vulnerable. It would feel, oh, great, we already made this deal. I gave you this thing, you give me $5. Great, I gave you the thing, you give me $5. But that's not how the vulnerability game works. The vulnerability game automatically comes without the automatic answer. Last week, I cast some aspersions. I said some negative, derogatory things about Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay, Self-Reliance, and how much it paved the way for this tradition of individualism and Unitarian Universalism. I want to modify that and extend that a little bit. We talked about it in the discussion group after the worship service last week, and I would certainly welcome and encourage you to come to the one after the service today. We talked a little bit about how that message of individualism can be super helpful at some points in our lives. And so there's a teacher that I have who talks about a 6-stage model of human development. I don't think he developed it, but it starts off with union. When we are first created as a person, we are reliant entirely for our existence on another being. And then gradually we graduate from that stage of union to dependence, where we're very much a different person, but we still need our sustenance, our support to be satisfied. And so that's when the one single circle of union starts to spread out and be a couple of linked circles where they are dependent on each other. And then we graduate from the dependence to being codependent, and so very much in a relationship with each other, as opposed to one individual being reliant on somebody else. Our moods, our feelings, our state of being impacts each other, and we feel the push-pull of how we show up in relationship. And then we reach the teenage years and we enter into counterdependence. And counterdependence is, I am this because you are not that. And all of these stages, they don't necessarily go away totally. Certainly, anybody who's ever had surgery, like I have, you enter a stage of dependence for a period of time. Anybody with any sort of ability issues, as most of us have, we don't totally get rid of any of these stages, but they're all things that we develop the capacity to move into. And so the counterdependence one, if you've ever been in a bar and somebody has turned on Fox News or MSNBC or whatever your particular thing is of I'm not that, you might have flashed back to the stage of counterdependence. But then hopefully we get to a stage of independence that is not just about being not that thing, but is about being fully ourselves. And particularly if we felt particularly enmeshed in something that we realize doesn't actually serve us anymore, and we need to go out on our own, the capacity for this independence becomes vital. And that's part of what Emerson was digging into. At one point I was told that one way of defining independence, or a way of thinking about independence, might be becoming a lawyer even though your parents want you to. That even though there's a frame that's telling you should do this thing, and you might want to rebel against it, you still choose what feels true and right to you because it feels true and right to you. But then the next stage after independence is interdependence. And that's the one that is super challenging in our culture, because so much of our culture is steeped in this independence stage. In our society, we rarely get to practice that last stage of development. I talked last week about this concept of orthodoxy and orthopraxy in religion. How the orthodoxic aspect of religion is about right belief, believing the right things. And orthopraxy is about right practice, doing the right things. And one of the benefits of a religion that focuses on common belief is that then you get these talking points to come back to. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? It's a good talking point you can come back to and discuss. There's particular content, stories that we can come back to. For religions like Buddhism that focus instead on common practice, the talking points shift to being about what we're practicing or the ideas that inform our practice. For Unitarian Universalism with no creed or doctrine, and doctrine, one way of translating the word doctrine is talking points, Without those particular things, the primary common thing for us to come back to is covenant, the garden that we are creating together, which is necessarily a more vulnerable, countercultural conversation. So this whole series is intended to invite us into practicing that conversation with each other. We'll do a little solo practice with it today, so no partnered stuff, just solo. In a moment, we'll get to that. But before we do, I wanted to keep in mind something else that I briefly mentioned last week. In Unitarian Universalism, it's important for us to not forget to ground our promises in the center of value and power. To ground our promises in the center of value and power. And what I mean by that is that there are three elements to covenant. The first one is the individual, just the self. The second one is sort of a horizontal dimension of community. And then the third one is a vertical dimension of whatever it is that is the center of value and power for us. And for some folks that might be God, or for other folks it might be something else. But whatever it is, that center must be deep. In Unitarian Universalism, just because we don't all believe in the same God doesn't mean that we don't have the responsibility to identify and adhere to whatever it is for us that is that center of value and power. And why is that important? Because without that, it's too easy to revert to idolatry. Idolatry is this thing, often when people think of it, they think of the story in the Old Testament of the golden calf and breaking idols and that sort of thing. Idolatry is the substitution of something smaller for the bigger thing that it represents. And so in Christianity, idolatry can look like focusing on some piece of Christianity more than the core of it. Getting so caught up, for instance, in the worship and the attention to the Bible that it diminishes the role of Jesus in one's life. For Unitarian Universalists, idolatry can look instead like relating to church as I church. This is the place where I get to do whatever I want. But in order to tend to that tree of life, in order to properly tend to that vulnerability, it has to be about so much more than us as individuals. It becomes problematic when our larger vision of religious freedom married with responsibility just becomes about us. So I'm going to invite you into some reflection time. I posed this question last week about faithfulness. And for a couple of minutes, we're going to just contemplate what is the center of value and power for you. And we've got some paper and some pencils, which we're going to pass around for folks to write down on this piece of paper. Just what is it that is the center of value and power for you? And this doesn't need to be the final answer. You're not going to be checked on this. This is just an exploration for you to go on. So if I could have somebody come up and to help pass these around, that would be wonderful. And maybe yes, thank you. Second person, great. So maybe you wrote something down that surprised you. Maybe you haven't written anything down and you're still wondering what you might write down. This inquiry is one of those inquiries that you can take home with you and continue to think on and deepen. And so if you wrote something down, what is it like to just feel that recognition? Maybe it feels like it's right on the mark. Maybe you got sort of close, but it doesn't quite fit actually what the core of center and of value and power is for you. Maybe you could just write down the word God, and maybe that works for you. Maybe there's some other belief that slides easily into that space for you. Or maybe it's going to take some more contemplation. But if you, to whatever extent you have a sense of what that is for you, whether you put it into words or maybe it's sort of an abstract sense in your heart and soul, to what extent are you living in alignment with that? To what extent is your life lined up for you with what is core? What is core to being human? What is core, what is highest of value to what it means to be alive in these few years that you have on this planet? In what ways are you feeling like you're aligned with that and you're faithful to it? And in what ways are you a little bit off the mark? In what ways could you live into it even more fully? What way of living would be big and bold enough that you cannot do it on your own? But living so fully into it would mean that you're lined up that much more with what feels core for you. And what support might be helpful in that. And so with that same piece of paper, with that same pencil, we're going to take a couple of minutes. And this one might be a little bit more tentative. I'm not sure what that living big and bold like that would look like, or I'm not sure what kind of support that might be like. I totally resonate as somebody who has struggled for years to ask for help. Like when somebody says, "Can I help you with this?" It'd been a long time before I learned how to say, "Oh, actually, I have an idea for you." The sitting in the question in and of itself is valuable. But the question, once again, is what would it take for you to align yourself, your life more fully with that center of value and power that you wrote down? What would it take for you to align yourself with that? And we'll just take a couple of minutes for that reflection. This practice of not living for ourselves alone, not just having a general intention of the direction we kind of like to go or what we think is important to us, but specifically forming covenants with one another, is my suggestion, my invitation to you over this coming week. To have a covenant conversation with one person. Whether or not you use the word covenant, whether or not they're a member of this congregation, but if they are, that's great. It doesn't need to be a particularly, you don't need to have really high standards for yourself in this particular conversation. The point is to just have the conversation. To discuss what is of the utmost value to each of you. Whether it's God, whether it's something else. And then what support might we need from each other in order to align with that more fully? What support might we need from one another to align more fully with that? It could look like any number of different things. Maybe a once-a-month coffee date to specifically check in and talk about it. Maybe an every morning at 7:30 a.m. text back and forth. Maybe something else entirely. Some other kind of support of sending cards to one another. Whatever it looks like for you, whatever support it would take to build into a covenant, to live more aligned with whatever for you is that center of value and power. That is my invitation to you over this coming week, so that we can sustain this tree of life, embracing our core UU practice of covenant making, covenant breaking, and covenant mending as a key opportunity for our vulnerability, our hopes, our dreams to be met and to be gifts to one another. Having gathered on this Sabbath morn to worship in spirit and truth, to raise a joyful noise to the eternal mystery, to reconfirm our covenant, to seek wisdom in love, to strengthen our commitment in the common good, may we consider more deeply the ways of our hearts, to join with others in our efforts to quicken our compassion and mercy, to deepen our understanding, to renew our courage, to remember who we are. May we know one another's minds, singing and dreaming and walking and sharing together and trusting that our fears will burn away, that our souls will unfurl their wings. May our feet be guided on this journey as we search our hearts, hold each other's hands, and stand by each other, so that grace may spread into the world by our living out of our Unitarian Universalist faith more fully tomorrow than we can today. And may that ever be so.
Thank you very much, Pastor. That was very nice. Now is a time in our service for the offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. Money in the cups goes to a charity chosen by the Faith in Action FIA ministry for every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to the Northwest Indiana Community Action Agency. For those not here with us today, there's an online link for both one-time and regular donations. And maybe we have two more volunteers, please? For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. Now please rise if you're willing and able to join us in singing of the closing hymn, number 348, Guide My Feet in the Gray Hymnal.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain.
Please be seated. Our closing words. Let peace reside in your heart. Let grace be spread in the world by your caring touch. Let love spill from your mouth whenever you speak. Move from this space carrying the blessing and responsibilities of living in community with you. And remember, you are never, ever on this journey alone. Amen. Ashanti, blessed be.
Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you lie, I will lie, beloved. Where you lie, I will lie. Where you lie, I will lie, beloved. Where you lie, I will lie. Your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. Your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. You're divine, my divine.
Yeah. Yeah. If you would, help me extinguish the chalice. We highlight to hold the commitment of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you. Come back and have some coffee.
And if you'd like to join the conversation after the worship service, we'll start in about 15 minutes right here.